I don't like it when people try to scare me about perimenopause and menopause symptoms. I'm guessing you don't either. Sometimes it seems like every article or book or podcast episode is all about all the bad things that could happen during this time. It has exactly the opposite effect that we would want it to when we focus on all these potential problems. We just want to have some simple tips and solutions, right? We just want to be seen, to be understood, and to feel better. Well, today's guest is here to help us do exactly that, so stay tuned. Welcome to Mind Your Midlife, your go-to resource for confidence and success, one thought at a time. Unlike most advice out there, we believe that simply telling you to believe in yourself or change your habits isn't enough to wake up excited about life or feel truly confident in your body. Each week, you'll gain actionable strategies and, oh my goodness, powerful insights to stop feeling stuck and start loving your midlife. This is the Mind Your Midlife podcast. I've always been a pretty good sleeper. Wait, don't hit stop or pause. Don't throw tomatoes at me. That was until I hit my late 40s and early 50s. So growing up, I could sleep through anything. I don't know if any of you fell into that boat. I once slept through a fire alarm in my college dorm, which is not really a great thing, actually. But when I hit this age, I started waking up all the time and worrying about a million different things. Daytime me, as you know, is a mindset coach, a life coach. I help people understand that worrying is like praying for what you don't want. But nighttime me did not care. Nighttime me was going to worry. And so, of course, I would also have hot flashes and all the things happening as well. So this is a midlife podcast. We're going to talk about various aspects of perimenopause a lot. And I really like today's guest's angle on these issues. Marjorie Nass discovered yoga a long while ago at a time when her life was just crazy stressful to the point where it was affecting her health. It was affecting her digestion, her sleep, all of it. And she learned how to be present in the moment with yoga. That started her on a path to years forward now, creating her Pericycle Lift method and applying what she has learned to help women in perimenopause and menopause using classes, workshops, online coaching, and retreats. So we're going to ask, what if it's the constant stress that is the source of many of our physical perimenopausal issues? Let's talk about that. And we're going to talk about what to do. I won't leave you without that. And really make sure you listen to the end because Marjorie has two cool offers for you. One of the real key things we're going to talk about today is our stress response and staying in a stressed state. We're talking about how does this affect perimenopause, menopause, all of these symptoms that women have at this time. So tell us more about what you mean when you say our stress response.
Yeah, so thank you. So the body really has two different states. We can be in a stress response, which is called the sympathetic state or the sympathetic nervous system. It's also known as fight or flight. And that's where all our energy is focused on how can we get out of a situation. Our heart is beating, we're generally not breathing well, and our heartbeat is faster. So more and more, we are living in that state all the time, without reprieve. And the other state is called the parasympathetic state. We sometimes hear it as the rest response. I like rest and digest, rest and restore. Because when we're in that response, our body can function properly. And when I mean it can function properly, we can digest well. Ayurveda is the science of life. It's a branch of yoga's sister science. Digestion is key. Mm-hmm. So when we're not in a settled response while we're eating, our body can't use what we're eating to digest, absorb, assimilate. And I always say that you could be eating the most balanced, perfectly picked out of the garden, organic, grass fed, freshly, whatever. But if you're eating it and you're upset, if you're eating it and you're rushed, if you're eating it and you're having a conversation that's upsetting, you will not get the benefits of that food. It is so important because the body can't be in the stress response and be trying to deal with things and digest properly. So even if you don't have any digestive issues, we still have to think about how food can become our body. Like, think about it. Whatever you're eating, the animal, the plant, the animal that ate the plant, it's becoming our body. It's that important. And so if we're only thinking about, macros and calories, we're not thinking about actually what's coming our body. So I talk about the how, when, why, where, and with whom you're eating rather than just what you're eating.
Ooh. Okay. So yes, I'm going to pause us for a second, but I love this topic.
Yeah.
So way back I just looked it up while you were explaining that, way back in episode 17 last year, I had a naturopathic doctor talk to us about gut health. And interestingly, as we were kind of finishing that episode, she said, but you know what? We haven't even scratched the surface on stress, because that is a huge deal with gut health. We need a whole nother episode for that. And so apparently here we are.
Yeah. And again, like, let's start with the simple things first. I know that, gut health is so important, and I'm sure she talked about so many valuable things, but let's start with the simple things first, where we can sit down and breathe, where we're normally eating food at our desk and taking 5 minutes, we can step away. Even if you turn your desk away, your chair away from your desk, taking some time to breathe, taking a little more time to eat, things like that are going to help your gut health and your digestion because of the state that our body. And, we think about only sex hormones when we're going through perimenopause and menopause, but the body has so many more hormones that we want to be in a balanced state. And the body, society, our culture, the world has evolved much more quickly in the past 300-400 years, especially in the last 50 years, than it had in tens of thousands of years before. So our body really can't catch up with that, if that makes sense. Even since I've been teaching for 25 years, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't have cell phones. And I know we do. And there's so much view in that. Of course, I'm not telling anybody to throw their phone away. But if you're looking at your phone while you're eating, and I am guilty of this sometimes too, we're just going to get caught up and our body doesn't get the message that we're eating.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting when you talk about being on your phone while you're eating, or kind of always being in a rush. And it's making me think of whenever I would hear advice on eating back when I was trying to lose weight and get healthy, people would say, well, don't eat standing up or don't eat in a hurry. And I thought it was because I needed to pay attention to how much I was eating and give my body time to feel full. And I think it probably is because of that, but this feels like a whole nother dimension that's really important.
Absolutely. Again, if we're stressed about something and we're eating, focusing on the miracle of how this food is becoming your body and how it helps you to think and it helps you to move and it helps you to feel, because everything is connected. If we're only thinking about food as how it looks on our body, we're missing this very, very key component. We're missing this appreciation for how our body works. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning about the amazing things the body can do. And when we're appreciating that, we often can appreciate our food more. And we are more concerned about what we're putting in our body when we think about that as well.
Yeah, it's back to being present, as you were saying at the beginning,
Yeah,
being present while we're eating. And I was going to say, well, why is this such a big issue now? But I think we've kind of talked about that. There's a lot of distractions, right? There's a lot of hurry. There's just everything taking our attention away from what we're supposed to or ideally focusing on, I'm guessing.
exactly. Exactly. And when we talk about as we're aging, what we could get away with in our 20s and 30s starts to catch up with us. Our bodies are changing, our sex hormones are changing. That's why the older that we get, the harder it is to get pregnant because we're changing. And if we're continuing to do and eat and exercise the same way that we did, things are going to start to catch up with us in perimenopause and menopause. And what I mean by that is that we're at a different phase in our life, and it's important to kind of recognize and honor that. And you may be in a phase where you still have young children when you're in your 40s. Taking care of yourself and listening to your body and what it needs is so important. And if we're pushing ourselves with exercise, particularly in the same way, that can start to exacerbate some symptoms. Because if we're doing a certain exercise that puts us into stress response, that's going to release more of the stress hormones. So I'm talking about like heavy duty cardio, which stresses the body more. So that can, even when we're in that fight or flight again, it's harder to calm down. It's harder to be present. It's harder to make choices by listening to our body when we're forcing it to do certain things.
Interesting. And I'm I'm wondering if there's anyone out there who's now thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to exercise. I thought I was supposed to exercise.
Well, hang on. So I call it movement. So this idea that we have to exercise to maintain our weight or of course maintain our heart health and our health. Absolutely. We have to move. But there's a big difference in running for an hour and a half than taking a walk, a fast walk for a half hour, and then doing some breathing. And this can be one of the hardest things with my clients that I work on when they're trying to get rid of hot flashes, when they are finding that they're gaining weight, when they find that they're scattered, and especially that they're not sleeping, because it all comes back to sleep. And if we're in the stress response, we might be sleeping, but we're not getting that good quality sleep. And that can be why it's hard to fall asleep and why we wake up in the middle of the night and why we're getting hot flashes and night sweats.
Oh, so many things. My brain is spinning. Okay. In a good way. In a good way. It's spinning in a good way. Okay, you mentioned the stress response related to sleep, related to hot flashes. Let's dive a little bit more into some of the things that people might be experiencing during this perimenopause, menopause phase, and talk about how the stress response really aggravates that or creates more issues.
Yeah. So, for example, I work with a lot of professional women who are in corporate situations. A lot of them are going back to the office now, and they are finding that their heart is racing and they're getting hot flashes at certain points during the day. It's very clear
That's me.
when they're having them. And I'm really into data and tracking things. And what are you thinking about while you're having a hot flash? What was going on in the half an hour before you were having a hot flash? Were you thinking about a meeting? Were you worried about a colleague? Were you worried about what's going to happen when you go home? You're in the stress response. Your heart is already beating. And then there's this surge of heat that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when we're having a hot flash, we tend to get more stressed because it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be sweating. What am I going to do? Where's the fan? Am I going to have to go into the bathroom and cool myself off? So all of that makes it worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas, so that's one example. If we're stressed before we're going to bed, from a conversation, from the news, from thinking about what happened during the day or worrying what's going to happen in the next day, that creates a sense of going to sleep and the body not really being in rest or digest mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where another surge of heat can come up, or just waking up. Some women just wake up. It's not necessarily that they're sweaty, but they're waking up. And it's all connected with what we're doing all day and how we're setting ourselves up for sleep. So for a lot of women, there's the brain fog and there's the irritability. That starts with sleep. Because if we're not sleeping, everything else is harder. We also get hungry if we're not sleeping. I have a brand new puppy. So, he's 6 months now, but the first few weeks, he was getting up in the middle of the night to go out, sometimes twice. And boy, did I notice it the next day. I was like so hungry. First of all, I was so hungry. And my body was like looking for more fuel. And I found that I just couldn't focus as much. So it's so simple when you have the contrast of sleeping really well. If you're sleeping really well, like I am, which I've worked on a lot.
Yeah.
But if you're in this constant sleep deprived state from hot flashes, from waking up, of course you're going to be irritable. Of course you're going to be forgetful. So I think so many women are focusing on those things without going back to getting a good night's sleep and prioritizing sleep and prioritizing how they can get themselves into a state. And, this can be so different than how women are living. And we hear about the self-care and go get a massage and, go do all these things to take care of yourself. But how are you putting yourself in an emotional state, a mental state, a physical state that's going to serve you?
Yeah.
Continuously. It's not just that hour of the massage. How is that? What are you doing to really impact your life every single day?
So I'm finding this fascinating, and listeners, I hope you are too. Let me see if I can kind of put together what you've said so far. And then listeners, I promise we're not going to leave you hanging. She's going to give you some tips on how to get into this non or less stress state. So in this modern world that we live in, at these age ranges where these things are an issue, we're probably rushing around, whether we're working or not. We've got maybe kids, we've got other obligations. Everything is rushed. We're not calming down. We're not taking the time to eat. We're not focusing in the present. Even if we're exercising and trying to take care of our bodies, it's still maybe a rush, kind of a high stress situation. And that can aggravate hot flashes, not being able to sleep, night sweats, weight gain because we're more hungry. Do I have it kind of all put together there?
100%. And again, what we were doing in our 20s and 30s, we might have skated through, but now it's catching up with us. And a lot of us are sleep deprived. It's sometimes called being in a sleep debt. So even if you have a couple good nights sleep, it's not enough. And we kind of normalize this. And a lot of us have normalized getting energy from caffeine.
Absolutely.
That's just the only way to kind of get through, or with sugar. And that causes, more issues with digestion and in the body. So it's a vicious cycle, but there is hope, you guys. It doesn't have to be this big life change. It's not this big life change. I'm going to give you small, simple things that you can start to think about.
Okay, so then that is what we want to do here, because I don't want to leave anyone feeling overly stressed after listening to this episode, or we might be there. So what can we do? What can we do?
Okay. So we're going to start with taking a deep breath. And it's a cliche because it works. So one breath, but a very specific breath can help. So we can do this now. It's just going to take a second. Put your hands on your belly, right over your navel. And I want you to breathe through your nose into your belly. And if that feels hard, that is one of the reasons why, if you're breathing into your chest, you're feeling stressed, your body isn't getting enough oxygen, period. So if that was hard and you're feeling like you're breathing into your chest, your body's not getting enough oxygen. That can be why you're tired. That can also be why your brain is foggy. So again, breathing into your belly on an inhale. Your lungs are filling up more. And then exhale through your nose, through your mouth. It doesn't matter. Feel your navel moving in towards your spine. So I'm going to teach you what that means, because I think it's important to understand our body. When our lungs fill, our diaphragm is moving down, which makes the abdomen move out. And when we exhale, the diaphragm moves up. If we're only breathing into the top of our lungs, we're missing all this oxygen, which impacts every single system in our body, every single function of our body. So we can just start there. You can start doing one breath before you eat. You can start doing one breath before you get up in the morning. You can start, and you might feel like, oh my God, this feels so nice. I'm going to do a couple more. It's free and it takes less than a minute. Why are you doing this? You're doing it for your loved ones, for your family. So these couple of minutes that it might think that you have to move on to the next thing changes everything. So I work with a woman. She's amazing. She's an incredibly successful realtor. And she would get up in the morning and just immediately check her phone, think about all the things she had to do all day. And she had felt like she had to organize those things. So we started this exact way. I can't do that. I can't do that. If you're resisting this, you're not alone. So we worked on why does she want to feel this way? Her husband, her loved ones, she wants to make, an impact in the world. Taking a breath turned into a few minutes more of breathing because she felt the difference, and she started out her day in a different way. The things didn't feel so stressed, didn't feel so stressful. So it's starting with a big reason why you want to do this, and just little things. You're going to start to notice that you feel like you have more time, that your mind isn't racing in the same way, where you can focus on a breath. And there we go on with more and more breaths. I was telling somebody yesterday, I grew up on the East Coast in New York City, didn't drive very much. Now I'm in San Diego, and we have stoplights. Lights, traffic lights.
Traffic lights
that are 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Ooh,
that is
a
long time that I'm able to sit and breathe. I can't do anything about that traffic light, but I can do something I can choose to do something that's going to help me for the rest of the day.
You know what? I really appreciate your explanation to breathe into your stomach. And it doesn't exactly make sense at first, because of course we know the oxygen is going to our lungs, right? Like, why is my stomach getting bigger, let's say, as I do this? But you explained it well. Now I get it. So basically more oxygen is then pushing because the lungs are expanding more.
You're feeling your breath throughout your whole body. It's like a cylinder that we're filling it in 3 dimensions, but most of us are not breathing fully. And that really does impact our cognitive ability. If you're feeling tired, rather than grabbing a cup of coffee or closing your eyes, that's totally fine if you want to take a little power nap, try some breathing.
So simple.
And free.
And free, simple and free. What a good piece of news.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate that it can be something quick too, that you're saying actually makes a difference, because if we give ourselves, this is really part of the problem maybe, but we sometimes give ourselves, well, I have to wake up and I have to do this and this and this and this. And then, when I'm done with work, I have to do this and this and this and this for mindset, maybe. And that creates more stress. It creates more hurry. It creates more of the same thing sometimes, depending on the person, depending on what it is. So I like this. You can breathe at any time. It takes less than a minute. And I did. It felt good. I don't know how to describe it, but it felt good.
And that's just one breath. And that's why I say just start with one, and another one's going to take another 30 seconds. And the more you feel that way, you're like, wow. And you can come out of it a little more clearly, and with less of that mind chatter that's going on about all the things you have to do for the rest of the day.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to adopt this as a new habit for myself for sure. Yeah. So tell me, if somebody's intrigued by this and they might want to work with you a little bit more in detail or connect with you, how can they do that?
So my website is marjorienass.com. You can learn more about me. You can learn more about the method that I use that I developed. It's called the Pericycle Lift, and which includes mindset. It's a deep dive into symptom solving and then really consciously making the changes, simple changes. So I'd like to offer your listeners, for everyone, to have a free 15-minute conversation with me. You can book that right on my website, and I'll be able to tell you, there's a form first. I'll be able to really diagnose it. I call it a perimenopausal assessment call, where, the source of some of those symptoms, what's going on. And then if we're a good fit, I can tell you more what that would look like for me to support you through this journey. It doesn't have to be miserable. It doesn't have to be hard. There are these simple tools that align with our bodies that we can all start with first. If you decide that you're going to do something else, great, but at least have these tools that are going to benefit you and your loved ones, because when you're feeling better, everyone around you feels better. So I'd love to support anyone with that kind of conversation.
Excellent. I love that idea. And so, yes, that link will be in the show notes as well. And wow, this has been a great conversation. I feel like I really learned something that can be life-changing for me and for other people. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Wow. My OMG moment was really quite early in this episode, where I just kind of paused and took in what Marjorie was saying, that we're not absorbing nutrients from our food if we're eating in this stressed state. That's big. And if we're taking anything away, let it be that you already breathe all the time, every day. So if we just pay attention consciously a little bit more, it could be an amazing change. I love that. We don't need a million extra new things. Just breathe. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to episode 8 with Kamini Wood, because that continues this discussion of breath work and fits together really nicely. And you heard Marjorie offer a free 15-minute call with her. That link will be in the show notes. And she is also doing something very cool for us. If you are listening to this prior to January 22nd, 2025, Marjorie is going to come into the Pod Squad Facebook group, and she's going to do a live with me to talk about sleep and sleep issues and what we can do. So the link is in the show notes. Go into Facebook under groups and look for Mind Your Midlife Pod Squad and come join us. I would love for you to do that. I want to take just a minute and thank you, listeners, for the amazing reviews that have been coming in. Happy Go Healthy said this podcast is a must if you need support and ideas to cope with the many issues that come up in midlife. Thank you for that. O2VT fan, thank you. You said you love the podcast and that I provide excellent advice and insight as we navigate our midlife journey. I am thrilled to be able to do that. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, leave a review. Maybe I'll mention it on an episode coming soon. Now, make sure you've hit the follow button on Mind Your Midlife Podcast, because the next episode, I am going to be talking with you about stress. Again, let's continue the theme, but with a little different take. Have you ever thought that you would only really have success if you had to have a lot of stress about it? You had to be busy and crazy. What if it could be fun? Let's talk about it. And until then, oh my goodness, let's keep creating confidence and success one thought at a time.